Well, for more on the power situation in Nigeria, Executive Secretary of the Association of Power Generation Companies, Dr. Joy Ogaji, as well as energy consultant Bode Fadipe, join us now on Newsnight. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to begin with you, Dr. Ogaji, because by the very definition, you are to generate electricity for the company. So how do you explain to Nigerians that the country is experiencing a blackout at the moment, and why Nigerians shouldn't believe the TCN, which has blamed you for the incessant blackout?
Thank you and good evening. It's a pleasure being on this platform to state the position of the GENCOS. I'm laughing because the situation is ironical to me, in that from 2013, the power generation companies have been making power available and the system never bothered to take the power. From 2013 to 2020, we increased power from 3,427 megawatts to about 8,000 megawatts. And consistently for those number of years, the distribution and the transmission were trading blame on who was taking and who was not taking. And on average, they were taking just 3,500 megawatts. Now, in power generation, there are two components. There is the capacity and there is the energy. So if you are not paying me capacity, then I don't owe you any obligation to keep extra capacity that you're not paying for, because the capacity payment involves fixed costs that has to do with putting a number of capital investments in place to be able to keep that amount of power in place. So consistently, government, the sector has been taking just 3,005. And so we've been working with the 3,005 and even the 3,005 megawatts for the past nearly 9 years. If you check from 2013 till date, they have not paid 100% for even that 3,500 they've been utilizing. So let's take, for example, you are a lady or a guy selling akara, and you have a contract to supply 100 akara. And the bilateral contract involves the other party collecting 100 akara and paying for the 100 akara. And for the past 9 years, you have been generating 100 akara, and they consistently take only 35 akara. Will there be any incentive to continue to produce 100 akara? I'm sure you will say no. So that is exactly where we are. The GENCOs have kept this capacity for low these 9 years. And since it was not being utilized, they don't have money to keep the capacity waiting again. Again, if you can see Mbet's rebuttal, Mbet said they have only 5 GENCOs they are paying capacity for. So if you're paying for only 5 GENCOs, ask those GENCOs to give power to you for Nigerians. Why are you bothering others that you don't pay for?
Okay, I'm not sure it's not even more complicated than when we first started. But you know, the Akara example is a very good one that actually helps us understand what's been going on. Mr. Fadipe, let me bring this to you. I mean, federal government is owing 1.6 trillion naira to the GENCOs. And the CBN has warned banks not to give loans to the GENCOs. What do you make of this? And now we're hearing if the debt is not paid, darkness is going to continue. How do we get out of this?
I think very seriously there is a major issue here that we really need to deal with. If truly the GENCOs are being owed 1.6 trillion from the inception of privatization, then there is a major problem. And for me, it goes to show one fact that the privatization, without necessarily saying it has failed, I think that's where it has come to, because privatization was predicated on 4 major factors. 1, that government will stop funding the sector. 2, that there will be efficiency. 3, that the sector will be another stream of income for government. And 4, that the sector will grow from there. So if by now government is still funding the sector, then there is a major problem. And for me, Mbet NBET, I mean, the blame is at the doorstep of NBET, because this is a fight between GENCOS and NBET, and Nigerians are just being, held to ransom for no fault of theirs. Government in its wisdom said, okay, look, I cannot fund this sector again, let's begin to do the following things, and government took the step to do that, established NBET, and then NBET is doing all of this. Part of the problem we are seeing is the single buyer problem that we are having in this country. NBET is the single buyer of the energy that is coming from the GENCOS, and NBET is not able to meet up with its own responsibility. Okay.
Dr. Ogaji, I mean, thank you for using that analogy of the Akara. It's very simple for everybody to understand. But again, 1.6 trillion naira for what exactly? Because NBET has said, NBET is disputing these figures. And like you said, they're only paying for capacity, GENCOS with capacity. Are we paying for wastages here when you use the analogy again? For the 75 they're not able to pick up, is that what the 1.6 trillion naira is for? Also, there was an emergency meeting called by the Minister of Power yesterday. How productive was that?
Okay, thank you for those two questions. Let me start from the last question. I read it on the pages of newspaper that the Minister of Power called an emergency meeting and that GENCOS were in attendance. As you know, I represent the GENCOS. I was not part of that meeting. And to tell me what was discussed, I don't know. I saw on the paper, I checked with my GENCOS. I don't know which of the GENCOS that attended that meeting. So I think that question is better answered by the minister's office. Back to your first question. The first question is, how did we arrive at the 1.6 trillion? If I tell you that 1.6 trillion is just a tip of the iceberg in terms of what we are being owed, if I analyze what we are being owed, we're looking at about 3-point-something trillion. Now I start. From 2016 to 2017, we are being owed huge amount on energy consumed but not paid. NBET is just being living in denial. I think NBET should snap out of living in denial and deceiving its principles by coming out to say, see, this is the reality. I am owing the GENCOS. Instead of denying, oh, we've paid them 80-something%. Oh, we have paid them everything. Oh, we are not owing them. Publish it. The GENCOS there NBET to publish all the payment figures either on its website or on the pages of newspaper. Show how much we invoiced you per month from February 2015 that NBET was introduced into the market. First and foremost, let me backtrack a bit so that Nigerians will understand how NBET came to be. Because Nigerians will be asking, who is NBET? Now we hear TCN, then another thing again, NBET. Now, in 2013, with what Mr. Fadipe mentioned, the privatization, the government thought it wise to privatize the sector. And in order to privatize the sector, the government sent out bids. They did a lot of road shows. And I want to tell you that about 152 consortia from 30 countries bidded for the assets of the generation as well as the transmission, and the distribution companies. Now, these 152 consortia that I mentioned did not crystallize into any contract, because when they looked at the terrain and what's obtained, they all pulled back. But these patriotic investors, I call them patriotic investors because they came together and said, come, let us invest in our country. And they invested in the generation assets. The performance agreement guard their relationship between BP and the GENCOS. I'm speaking specifically because I represent the GENCOS. I don't want to speak of the discos. However, the performance agreement was signed between the two parties, and each party had their own obligation. For the generation companies, they were given the obligation of ramping up capacity within 5 years. 5 years being 1st of November 2013 to October 2018, being 5 years. And the generation companies within that 5 years ramped up their capacity to 5,000 megawatts. Anybody can check the records in this on the system between 2013 and 2018. If we did not have more than 5,000 megawatts. So clearly, GENCOS kept to their own terms of the agreement.
All right, let me bring it. I have to cut you there because not much time. Mr. Fadipe, well, NBET actually says that the claims of 9,000 megawatts by the GENCOS are absolutely not accurate. You want to respond to that, and what's the way forward? I mean, the National Assembly has removed, you know, the power sector from the exclusive legislative list. Well, how much difference will that make if it eventually, you know, comes about? Well, and what's the way forward for the power sector?
I think the first thing we really need to do, like Dr. Ogaji said, we need to get back to the drawing board and then review the entire agreement that has that has been entered into by all the players in the market. I know, having said that, NBET, I mean the box should stop at the table of NBET in terms of payment. I think there is a major issue that NBET has raised that we must also give attention to, and that is a capacity issue that it has raised, which your colleague on the news tonight is talking about wastages along the line. If GENCOS are saying, okay, using their analogy now, we're able to move 35 to the market and then we still have 65. GENCOS needs to explain to us what they mean by that capacity charge. I know that there is a clause in the PPA, power purchase agreement, which talks about a pay or, I mean, take or pay situation. In other words, because they have the capacity there, even if you are not taking the load, you must pay, because they say that we are maintaining these stations and then we need to get it ready for you to be able to use. It's like somebody having a car. There are no passengers in it, but you say the car, the usage of the car must be paid for. I mean, how do you justify that kind of situation?
Amazing,
so both parties need to really sit down and look at all of these things very carefully.
Amazing analysis, Akara, and then the empty car. Amazing, something. Dr. Joy Ogaji, thank you so much, and Bode Fadipe, thank you both for joining us on Newsnet.